Hey guys, Joe Miles here with Osseo Gear. This is the Mission Whitetail podcast. We're going to be doing a deep dive into what it truly takes to kill these mature bucks. We're going to step outside the box and look at the why for gear, tactics, training, and more importantly, the mindset from over 35 years of chasing these magnificent animals all over North America. Thank you for following along and welcome to Mission Whitetail.
All right, guys, welcome back to Mission Whitetail. We have a super special guest today, a good buddy of mine. We have known each other for quite a while, done some hunts together. We got hooked up back in the Matthews Dominant Bucks days, way back when. We got Adam Hayes here, and Adam is the owner of the TV show Team 200, as well as the Deer Hunter's MoonGuide. And he has a ton of giant bucks under his belt. And it really is a privilege to have him today, to be able to pick his mind and learn a ton about what he does and how he does. So, Adam, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for the invitation. And picking my brain is going to be a short trip. So,
especially with that Ohio State hoodie that we got on right here. Yeah, that's already got my wires crossed. I don't know how good I'm going to do today thinking about that.
Like I said, I knew I was coming into enemy territory with the Alabama guys, so have to wave the flag.
Yeah, if Pork Chop was home right now, you know he'd be in the background with some Gamecock or Alabama SEC Roll Tide stuff going on.
I still need to send that Ohio State jersey to Pork Chop so he's got something colorful to wear this fall.
He'll have a burning part. You know he's going to college this year. He's going to be a freshman at Carolina. Yes.
You're kidding me.
No. He is full grown, buddy. He's chasing the co-eds as hard as he can go.
That's crazy. I didn't realize he was in college.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Is he playing ball?
No football. He's done with sports. Had his senior year. They were 13-0 and just he couldn't have been any better. They won the state championship.
He's got to focus now on those college girls.
100% focus it. Yeah, no doubt.
Right. Amen.
All right. Well, let's dive into some hunting stuff. Let's talk. Give us a little background on you. And I know you've done this a million times, but and most guys that are going to be listening to this are familiar with you. But give us a little background on you and kind of your style of hunting and you know, kind of, I always do this because I think it's important. You know, kind of your kill count on, I know you've got 4 over 200 and if I'm not wrong, maybe 10 or 12 over 170, but just go through a little bit of that.
Yeah. I actually shot my 12th deer here in Ohio last year over 170. So that was and that was the first buck I've killed in Ohio in a while. But yeah, I could back my screen up, maybe get a look like what you got there behind you to show off.
Yeah. Flip it up there. So guys can
hopefully
see.
I won't drop my computer off my desk.
Yeah. So there's some credibility there.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I just finished my 40th season bow hunting. Can you believe that?
Golly, that's awesome.
40 years, showing my age.
It's hard to get 40 years into bow hunting when you're only 35 years old. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that would be a trick, wouldn't it? No, man, I've been, 40 years bow hunting, been shooting a bow since I was 4. So it's been a long road, but I've been in the industry for 20 years, started with Skyline camouflage. I'm sure you probably got some listeners that never even heard of Skyline.
Yeah, most all of our listeners are dyed-in-the-wool Osseo Raptor camo guys.
Mm-hmm.
As they should be.
As they should be, yes.
I am now, too.
That's good.
But, 20 years in the industry.
Oops, hello.
Hello. Who's there?
We're muted now. Producing shows for a few manufacturers. And then, like you said, when you and I met, I moved to Florida working with Miranda to start the Dominant Bucks program. And then we started the Team 200 show. This is the 9th season, if you can believe that.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that.
And then, we bought the MoonGuide together. How many years has that been? That's been like 9 years now.
Yeah. It was really right when Team 200 started.
Yep.
Yeah, we bought that and resurrected it and brought it back. And, yeah, I mean, that's been a great project, I know, for you. And you've really taken it and run with it now. Got an app and everything.
Yes. I mean, the last decade has really been focused on Team 200 and the MoonGuide and trying to get a wall together like what you got behind you. So,
yeah, right. But, when I met you back then, even back then, you were kind of known for finding a particular giant, regardless of where that was. If it was in Kansas, Alberta, in your home state of Ohio, and really locking down on that one deer and getting him killed or getting a crack at him. And I think a lot of our listeners, want to know kind of how you do that. And I realize that hard work is the secret sauce. But a lot of our guys aren't guys that have 5,000 acre Iowa farms or 1,000 acre farms to hunt. They've got permission, they've got leases. They may go hunt with an outfitter. Kind of do things the same way you and I do them. As far as getting different places to hunt and that sort of thing, and don't own giant farms that can be managed. Drop in to kind of, let's just dive right in and kind of how do you go about that process?
I think really it's the main thing is all about finding that specific deer to hunt, because when you're after a specific animal, it takes things to a whole different level. You're more focused and driven and pay closer attention to detail. And I think it just makes you a better hunter, when you're focusing on a specific animal rather than hoping a big deer is going to show up, and walk by. And it's a completely different game. And that's what I live for. I mean, to me, I'd rather go out and find a big deer than have somebody say, go hunt this stand and this giant's going to come by at 7:30 and 20 yards and shoot him. I mean, it's that game, the chess game with the big deer is really what drives me, and has for a long time. And, having a specific deer to hunt is my goal every year. And you try to do what you can to make sure you're on a, what I try to do is find a, deer over 170 here at home. I hunt Illinois every year, Kansas every year. Now that COVID's over, you can get back up to Canada, and, Canada is without a doubt my favorite place anymore to hunt. I mean, ever since 20 years ago when I went to the bow zone for the first time, and you and I hunted the bow zone and had, probably the biggest deer I've ever seen in my life at 20 yards for 3 hours and ended up not connecting. And Canada's kind of been my nemesis ever since then. But the game up there and the limited pressure, it's just nothing like it in the States as far as I'm concerned. But
how do you find, we talked about this a little bit on the last podcast about access that Kevin and I did, but how do you, at home, obviously you can ride around, you can glass, you can run trail cameras. How do you find a big deer, a particular deer in Canada, for example, or in Kansas or in Illinois? What's your process there of finding a big deer?
It's different than it was, 10, 20 years ago, because, here at home, you used to be able to drive the roads in the summer and glass the soybean fields and find a big deer, and then, have a decent chance of getting permission to hunt them. And that's just not the case anymore. if there's a big deer out in the bean fields, there's 2 or 3 other trucks watching them, and good luck getting permission to hunt that area. So, I mean, the game has changed, and that's not just here in Ohio. That's pretty much everywhere. And I've been fortunate that, I live in Licking County, Ohio, which is one of the top counties for Boone and Crockett deer. And I hunt 2 really good areas in Illinois and Kansas that I've hunted for almost 20 years that both produce world-class deer. And, I've got to know, friends and farmers, and just got great places that I've not only hunted for close to 20 years, but I've gotten to know intimately, know where I need to be and where the big deer are. So yeah, finding them has gone from, summer scouting and watching soybean fields to running cameras year round, doing a lot of shed hunting, keeping in touch with all the locals as far as what they're seeing. And, if there's a big deer around, people know about it. So it's kind of shifted from going out and finding them to focusing on the areas that I hunt, and not only, running cameras and that sort of thing to find the bucks that are there, but doing what you can to grow big deer. I run, more food plots than ever before, not only here at home, but in Illinois. We've established, we've probably got 15 acres of food plots, and, trying to grow them more, because you just can't go out and find permission anywhere anymore. You got to do the most with what you've got. And that's pretty much the game for me anymore.
So we touched on this as well, that it goes back to relationships, building the relationships with the out-of-state guys or even the in-state guys. And that's a long process. Yeah. And I think you would agree with this. If you're serious about it, you're going to build those relationships, and you're going to keep expanding on that. You're going to get your foothold in Illinois or your foothold in Kansas, and create that relationship. And, we, again, not to beat a dead horse, because we've touched on this, but you have to bring value to that relationship. It can't be one-sided. Yep. Whether it's you're helping out, like you said, you've established food plots out there. I'm sure you're helping them get seed. You're going out there during planting time and helping with that. And you're providing value for your, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean, I'm assuming you're doing that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You can't just show up when season opens.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
it's a year-round deal.
If you do, it's going to be a short-lived relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and those are relationships, with my landowners and buddies in Illinois and Kansas. Is, there's some great people, and I'm out there as often as I can. Whether it's putting food plots in or going to somebody's wedding, or yeah, it's a relationship, and some of my, best friends in the world. So
yeah,
I enjoy going out there to see them as much as I do hunting.
Yep. And then to locate the big deer, and then get permission, your opinion is that has gotten extremely hard to do.
It certainly hadn't gotten any easier.
So many more people are doing it. So many more trail cameras, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I mean, unless you got really deep pockets, everything's, most of the good stuff is leased up no matter where you go. So, I mean, it's, hate to say it, but it's kind of becoming a rich man's sport. And unless you can afford to outbid the next guy, I mean, you're out of luck. It's just, that's the toughest part of the game anymore, is getting, good spots or new spots. Yeah, they're not making any more of that property. So,
yeah, I'm sure a lot of the good spots are getting bought up by developments too. So guys are getting more, compact into certain areas.
Yeah, it ain't getting any easier, that's for sure.
And I'm going back to, I guess, a little bit of your background. How did you get, I know you started shooting a bow at 4. How did you get started I guess, bow hunting? Was there a family member, or did you see some kind of old TV show, or what got you
Oh
going
no,
into that?
my dad bow hunted. My dad was
Okay.
the one that got me into it. Yeah, I was going with him even before I could actually hunt, just, sitting with him in the woods while he was bow hunting. I was doing that when I was 9, 10 years old.
And when you started, were you like kind of most guys where you kind of just sit one or two spots and on any kind of wind, or did you always kind of have a grasp of, were you always mobile and played the wind and all that?
Man, I'll bet you for the first 10 years, I was a lost ball in high weeds. Would be the best description. I wish I knew then what I know now, because it was a different game back then. But no, it took me a while to get it figured out. It really did. I mean, I struggled with it. I'd see deer, but I mean, back when I started, a tree stand was something that you built out of 2x4s, and that was your stand. And you hunted that stand every time you went, no matter what the wind was, what the moon was doing.
So
It was completely different.
Do you have like a light bulb moment that you can kind of recall where you had a successful hunt, or maybe got busted or something, where you're like, okay, and kind of started putting everything together? Or was there somebody that taught you that?
Yeah, my light bulb moment was the first deer that I killed that qualified for the Ohio Big Bucks Club, which was 140 inches. I'm sure it's still 140, but I got sick of not killing anything good, and I'd read every magazine I could get my hands on. And back in the day, North American Whitetail, reading the stuff that Dick Idle wrote and the Winsel brothers really helped me understand what was going on. But it wasn't until that year that I went out in the summer, found a big deer, glassed in the bean fields, and got permission, where that deer was living, focused on that deer, sat in a tree stand all July and August, watching that deer, figuring out what he was doing. And when I killed that specific animal and everything that I had done, worked, and that was the light bulb moment for me, really, focusing on a specific animal.
And that's, that's a bunch of research. You did a ton of research, like guys do today. They get on YouTube, they listen to podcasts, they do a bunch of research. But until you actually get out there and do it, make the mistakes, put the plan in place, it fails. And then it does succeed, like you say. That's where it starts to come together. You actually going out and doing it.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. It almost seems like, the whole hunting scene is getting away from, the basics, and woodsmanship and scouting. And, a lot of guys that, they run trail cameras and run bait, and their season consists of just watching those cameras until a good deer shows up, and then they go in and shoot them. And a lot of guys, I shouldn't say a lot of guys, but there's a certain portion of people that they don't understand the scouting and the woodsmanship and everything that, we used to have to do to figure these deer out before trail cameras and everything, that you
it's
have access
almost
to.
like there's a shift. We had Andre on, I think our second or third show, Lone Wolf Custom Gear. And it's almost a shift to where guys are focusing way more on their setups and their gear. They've got to be one sticking out of a saddle on public ground, and it doesn't matter if they're killing anything or not. This is how I hunt. There's nothing wrong with one sticking out of a saddle on public ground. That's great. But the focus, there's like this trend where it's getting away from exactly what you say, woodsmanship and actually killing deer, and the style or how you hunt, meaning the equipment and wear, has become part of the focus. It's a really strange phenomenon that I'm seeing.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And, if that's what guys are into, their setup and their equipment, and they're into that more than actually, shooting a big deer, I mean, more power to them. Everybody's got, specific things that drive them. So
Well, take us through your early season, pre-rut, rut, late season, kind of. I know this question's coming at you, putting you on the spot, but what is your process? You found the deer in Ohio, and let's just use that as a scenario. You found the deer, and then let's do an example like the last 200 you killed, because that's a pretty good story. You found the deer in Ohio. You're getting ready to hunt him early season. How are you going to do that? You don't get him early season. What's your plan pre-rut, rut? And you don't get him pre-rut or rut. How are you going to kill him late season? Walk through that, if you will.
Hunting specific deer, I really try to focus on early season and late season, because, when you're after a specific deer, you know what it's like in November. It's just next to impossible to try to pattern or predict a deer in November when they're breeding. So I really focus more on early and late. And then I try to, do a lot of my out-of-state hunting during the rut. But for here at home, it's all about early season. It's about, a lot of observation in the summer, watching these deer from observation stands, a safe distance away, figuring out how they use an area.
Break that down. Let me interrupt you. Observation stands. Explain that a little bit. Guys are going to be interested in that.
I'm just talking about getting up in a tree or at a safe distance, 200, 300, 400 yards, to where you can watch, a field, say a soybean field, and watch how these deer, the trails that they use, the winds they use to get in and out of that field safely, because they're probably going to be using the same trails with the same winds during season. So, whether I'm in my truck with a spotting scope 400 yards away or in a tree at the opposite end of the field with a good wind, watching, but observing, scouting, trying to figure out what they're doing. And, my thought process with that goes back to a article. Actually, it was a chapter in Jeff Murray's book, the Moonstruck book, when he interviewed Miles Keller, and he talked about hunting from the outside in, where he'd start as far out as he could, and just gradually work in closer and closer until he knew the exact tree he needed to be in to kill that deer. So that's my, focus and thought pattern, even in the summer, is safe distance observation until you can figure out exactly where you need to be to kill that deer before you ever go in there and hunt. Because I'm sure you've seen this, 9 times out of 10, the first time you go into a spot is going to be the best time to kill a deer, bar none. So why would you go in there until everything's perfect and you know exactly where you need to be to kill him? Because if there's one difference between me and most guys, I'd say it's that toughest part about hunting a big deer is not hunting until everything lines up. I don't think I have any, secrets about scouting that nobody else knows about, or being able to read sign. But I think I'm probably more patient when it comes to actually diving into that kill spot to kill that specific animal, because I want to know right where I need to be to kill him. And then I'm going to wait until I got the deck stacked in my favor before I go in there and hunt him, unless I get daylight picture of that animal making a mistake during daylight. Like this buck I killed in Ohio last year. Killed most of my deer on the red moon. I followed the moon, have for 20 years. I mean, that's why, we bought the MoonGuide, because it's something to believe in. But I mean, just because it's not a red moon doesn't mean I'm sitting at home, not hunting. And this buck last year was a deer I was waiting on. Been on this farm for 4 years and hadn't shown up. And third week of October, bam, just out of nowhere, he shows up in the corner of the soybean field. Wind was terrible, moon was terrible, weather was terrible, hot. But I mean, he showed up in daylight, and I dove in the next night and killed him. And you have to be ready to do that no matter what. So it's I'm kind of losing my train of thought now, but
no, that's awesome intel. Is that, hunt from the outside in, to summarize, or what I'm hearing, hunt from the outside in. But if you have to be prepared to move immediately if the conditions show themselves.
Yeah, and that's where, equipment like, Lone Wolf Custom Ears equipment, when I was able to dive into a spot when I killed my biggest buck in Ohio, saw that buck the night before come out of the CRP field, and he was pushing some does around, and they had just picked the corn, and it was a part of the farm. Actually, it was neighbor's farm I wasn't familiar with. Went there the next day, got permission, went in that night with stand and sticks on my back, kind of scouted as I went in, hung my stand. I wasn't, 12, 15 feet off the ground. And I watched a 208-inch giant stand up out of the CRP 80 yards from me and come my direction, and I killed him. When you can take equipment like that and do that without making noise, when you've got a world-class animal bedded 80 yards away, that says, all you need to know about their equipment.
Hayes, you're firing me up with this story. You're making me want to go hunt right now.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, man, you got to use equipment that you can do stuff like that, because, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, it's great to have tree stands pre-hung weeks or months in advance, and your trail camera set up where you've done all your scouting, and, when the plan comes together, that's great. But sometimes it doesn't happen that way, and a big deer shows up. And if I learned anything from Andre, being, tight with him and working for him for forever and seeing that guy at work in the field, is you've got to have a level of aggressiveness in your hunting, style to be able to take advantage, when a big deer makes a mistake like that during daylight. I mean, you can't just sit back and hope that deer is going to come to you. Sometimes you got to go to him.
All right. So that kind of segues, you talking about being mobile. What is, I know you've got preset stands that you've already got out in certain spots, but like right now, I'm sure in wherever you keep your stands, you've got your mobile setup ready to go. Walk through that for guys. Tell them what exactly is your mobile setup.
I really like that 5.0 that Andre's got. It's about the same size as the old Assault, and it's even lighter. I still like the full length sticks, because with my 20-inch inseam, 4 of those mini sticks is going to get me about 7 foot off the ground. So
not much space in there. You and I kind of got the same problem, Adam.
I can't have people hanging my stands for me, because I can never get from the first stick to the second stick.
You mean Scott Baker? You mean Scott Baker, for example?
Yeah, he'd be on the top of that list.
The tippity top of that list. Good gosh, he's nuts.
Well, he's spent 40 years working on rooftops, so he's not afraid of heights.
Yeah. So 0.5 full length sticks. Are you doing the double sticks or the traditional folding ones?
I like the traditional.
Yeah, I actually just ordered that 0.5 yesterday, believe it or not, from Andre with the. I did get the full length double sticks. Because I just want to try them, and I've got plenty of the others. Anything you're customizing on your stand, seat or your sticks or anything like that?
I do take everything a step further with the quietness. So, I mean, I go through 24 rolls of hockey tape every year, and I'll wrap the sticks, the stands, like where the seat folds down. I'll make sure the seat is either wrapped in hockey tape or I've got a pad underneath it, so when it closes, it's not metal on metal. I wrap my buckles on the straps with hockey tape. Just anything where you might have metal to metal contact, because especially on a mobile setup where you're going to put that on your back and try to dive into a spot where you could be within 100 yards of a bedded deer. You just can't afford to make any mistakes. So
yeah, that's something we did a lot of, I picked up from you way back in the day in Canada. We were hunting up there with 2 dogs. We were hockey taping. We were hockey taping everything. that's a story for another time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kevin wanted to ask you something about
Yeah.
early season before we get into your last 200. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Kevin.
you mentioned that you like to, set up the observation stands and glass from afar. How long? I know that Ohio, the bow season doesn't start, or the opener doesn't start till after they're hardhorned. How long of a time frame do you have before they get off that summer pattern? You got to be there, opening day, or do you have a couple weeks, or what's it looking like?
Man, it really depends on the specific deer, because I've hunted deer here at home that will be on their summer pattern, into mid to late October. And then I've had some, when they shed their velvet, they're gone, disappeared. So it really depends on the specific animal. I mean, if you've got soybeans that were planted late so that they're green in October, you got a good chance of those deer sticking around in that summer pattern, especially if you got oaks close by, because there's a big shift, to acorns early season too. But yeah, it just all depends on the deer. And that's where your scouting comes in, because I talk to a lot of guys that fall into that same deal where you watch a buck do the same thing all summer long. And as soon as he sheds his velvet, he's gone. And they're just banking on that deer being there for the opener. And a lot of times what I've found that those bucks do is when they shed their velvet, they're back to their core area. And it could be 100 yards, 200 yards away. It could be 2 miles away. And that's where your scouting pays off late season, finding the core areas where these bucks live, so that when they disappear from their summer pattern, that's where they're going to go. And a great way to know when they make that shift and where they go is not only to find those core areas, but I like to establish mineral sites in those core areas and put a camera on it, because I've had more than one big deer disappear from his summer pattern, goes back to his core area, and the first thing they do is hit that mineral site. And if you got a camera there waiting for him, you know what happened to him.
He's shown back up.
Yep.
So how do you what do you do? So it's post-season scouting. How do you go about finding these core areas? Are you finding their sheds, or finding a bunch of rubs, or what are you looking for?
It's usually thicker cover with a lot of big rubs. That's probably the biggest thing, is looking for a concentration of big rubs, rubs that are big around as Joe's leg.
Which leg are we talking about?
Pretty big or small rubs.
Yeah, pretty big or small. Yeah.
That's very broad.
Yes.
Not that size?
Yeah. Which leg? Yeah.
Yeah. Concentrations of big rubs around thick cover, and it always helps if there's a giant shed laying there. You know what deer it is, but that's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Take us through, shifting gears again, your last 200 in Kansas, because I know that's a heck of a story with that creek you went down. Go from start to finish. When you found out about the deer, kind of your plan, where you went and did cameras. I know it was really hot when you killed him. The moon was perfect. Walk us through that.
So, that was an area that I've been hunting for, almost 20 years with Chris Seymour. I've never been on that particular farm, although I've been on farms, within a mile of it. So I was familiar with the area, but we'd never seen that deer before. That deer showed up, I want to say it was early to mid-October on trail camera. Chris would run, corn piles on all of his properties so he could get an inventory of deer. And that buck started showing up mid-October. And I think he had, 3 guys hunting that farm before I ever got there. And most of the pictures were in the middle of the night, and after looking at the aerial of that farm, I was guessing that buck was not living on that property. He was living somewhere close, but not on that property. So I figured I had a little bit of time. I didn't throw everything in the truck and rush right out there, first picture that we got, even though I could have. The red moon was coming, the first week of November. which is usually super hot in Kansas. So I planned on waiting till I think I actually left on Halloween. Those pictures kept starting to get closer and closer to daylight, the closer we got to that red moon. So I timed it to where I would be there right before the red moon and have, 7 or 8 days of good hunting once it hit. So I got out there, still hadn't got a daylight picture of that buck. And the way that farm was set up was that it was in the middle of a block that was 2 miles long and a mile wide, and it was right in the middle of that block. One big chunk of timber, and it had a couple wooded fingers coming off of it. And as I'm looking at the property, there was really 2 places that stuck out to where it looked like if a big deer is going to come onto that property, that's following the terrain and the cover. Those were the 2 places where they were going to come in at. And they were on, opposite corners, back corners of that property. So the one where I ended up killing him really stuck out. And you could not design a better looking spot, if you could just create it. I mean, it was the back lower part of the farm. So it sat low and it was, kind of out of view unless you were back there. It had 2 fence lines coming together, property lines, and then a creek cutting through that diagonally. So there was literally 4 or 5 directions that a deer could come from any direction, following the timber, following the creek. It was like the hub or the spoke of that back there. Hub, I guess is the right word. But so to make it even better, that creek out there, those creeks are really deep, but they don't have a lot of water. They get washed out over the years, and they get, huge rainfalls that come through and wash that stuff out. So the creeks are really deep, but there was like 3 inches of water. So I could get down in that creek, walk in the water, which wasn't bad at all, only being a few inches deep, but it was, 10 foot deep. So you could walk down that creek and nothing knew that you were there. And I followed that creek probably 300 yards to my tree stand that was like right on the edge of it. So I basically climbed up out of that creek and right up the stand and got right in the middle of that, and nothing had a clue that I was there. And I normally won't hunt a stand, multiple days in a row, but that stand I was able to get in and out, not spook anything.
Was that a pre-hunting stand, or did you hang it when you got there?
Oh, I hung it when I got there. I hung that stand, and then I hung one on the other corner too.
Okay.
And
did you drop any cameras out, or you just knew the deer was there?
I hung cameras in both corners, but it was so hot when I got there. I mean, it was like 85 degrees and there was nothing moving. Deer were not moving. I'd see 1 or 2 deer, right at first light or last light. And not that there's a ton of deer on that property anyway, but the deer were just not moving. And I hunted that stand as much as I could. I did hunt the other end a couple times, but I really felt like the creek stand was going to be where I'd get an opportunity if I did. So that deer showed back up on camera a couple times when I was there, still not on daylight. I knew the week was just going to keep getting better and better the closer it got to the red moon. And I think it was the 6th or 7th day of my hunt. It was still 75, 80 degrees. Wind was blowing, right the exact direction that buck came from. Almost 2 hours before dark. I wasn't even expecting to see anything because it was so early and so hot. And it heard something turn around, and that buck was picking his way through the thicket heading to that creek. And he actually went to dive down in the creek, I'm sure, to get a drink. And he caught just a little bit of something where I'd come out of the creek, and he was sniffing around the base of my tree for what seemed like an eternity, but it was probably only a couple minutes. And I'm literally watching, a 220-inch non-typical through the crate of my lone wolf tree stand. And I mean, it's dead calm. You could hear a mouse fart. and I'm afraid to, to do anything. I'm not even looking at my camera, reaching back, trying to get it turned and twisted straight down, trying to get my bow ready, and you can hear in the video, you can hear that deer breathing, as he's taking in the what he's smelling on the ground. And just an epic encounter with a world-class animal, and ended up killing him. It's still to date my biggest deer. And right on the red moon.
Yep.
First time he showed up in daylight, 80 degrees out, almost 2 hours before dark. No reason for that deer to be up moving that early. Came in he was doing it right. He came in with the wind in his face. Fortunately, I think that might have been one of the first years, we started working with ozonics, and man, to this day, that was the light bulb moment for me with ozonics too.
So let's get into the red moon real quick, because again, most of the guys that listen here are familiar with it, but MoonGuide, red moon, just a 30,000 foot view. Tell us about that real quick, if you don't mind.
2 times every day when the moon is actually closer to the earth than any other time. That's the overhead and underfoot moon. And because it's closer at those 2 times, that's when it has the most gravitational pull. And that's what triggers the tides to come in and out.
Yep.
And the key to the MoonGuide is, there's only a handful of days every month when that overhead or underfoot moon peaks at prime time in the evening. And it's just a natural, instinctive deal that animals can sense that we can't, just like barometric pressure or, a storm coming in. They can feel that. And that's, whatever it is, it's an instinct that pushes them to get up and feed.
Yeah.
Countless guys I've talked to talk about deer moving in the middle of the day. Why are deer out in the middle of the day feeding today? Well, it was because the overhead and underfoot moon was middle of the day. I mean, you can watch farm animals, moving by the overhead and underfoot moon. And that's really what it's about. And you just can't tell me that something that's strong enough to move the oceans, the largest mass on this planet, doesn't affect animals and fish. It does.
No,
I don't care how many studies there are out there that say it has no effect on animals. It does. I've done my own study for 20 years. I've seen it firsthand. It's not 100%. Nothing is. But more times than not, that gravitational pull does push these animals to get up and move early, and I've seen so much, especially recently, on guys talking about these studies that says the moon doesn't affect animals. Well, I don't think that this is something, it's so minute. I'm not sure it's something that a study would even pick up on, because you're talking about probably less than 2 or 3% of the deer, the animals that we're chasing. So just a fraction of the deer herd that we're actually talking about. And we're talking about these deer, they're not moving that far to begin with. Some of these deer are moving less than 200 yards from bedding to feeding. So you're not going to see this huge spike in movement. And we're only talking about these animals getting up and moving a few minutes early enough, to where they're moving during shooting light.
Yep.
It's not some huge migration or huge movement pattern that I think these studies are even going to pick up on.
Yeah. And they're, how many mature deer are they really? Yeah, I agree with you, man. It's anecdotal to a sense, but it's not too, because so many people see it. See the exact same thing you're talking about. And like you say, middle of the day out feeding, why that day? A guy gets one daylight picture of a deer, and why did he daylight that day? And 9 times out of 10, if you go back and look at that picture and check the MoonGuide, you'll see it was an overhead or underfoot moon or right around that time.
Yeah.
We obviously, not to beat a dead horse, we both agree with that. The moon plays a huge part. And the thing that's cool about the MoonGuide, the new app that you have that you developed is it shows you those days. It shows you the red moon days. So if you are looking, like most guys, they get a week, 2 weeks vacation during hunting season. If you're looking out in advance, hey, I got a trip to Kansas, what dates do I need to pick?
And that's really where it shines, because you can't predict the wind or the weather 2 or 3 or 4 months or 6 months ahead of time like you can the moon. So yeah, if a guy's only got a week to plan his vacation from work, or he's booking a hunt, I mean, that's something that you need to look at. I mean, I've been planning my out-of-state hunts around that forever, and I shot, I think it was 3 years in a row. My 3 biggest bucks in Kansas, all on that red moon.
Yep.
And like I said, it's not 100%. Nothing is. It's not going to make a giant deer show up that doesn't live there. 90%, 95% of your deer herd is going to move the first and last hour every day, pretty much regardless of what the moon is doing or the wind or the weather.
Yeah.
We're talking about a very small percentage of the deer herd that you're actually focusing on. And when you can take multiple factors that stack the deck in your favor to get that animal up moving during daylight, why wouldn't you take everything into account? A good moon, a good wind for that animal to feel comfortable enough to move during daylight. And we should talk about that for a minute. And then, the weather, barometric pressure is huge. I follow the weather,
humidity, all of it.
Yeah. When you can line up multiple factors that are good, increased activity for that night, you're just increasing your chances.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, because big deer are, first of all, so rare and they're so hard to kill, and those are quote unquote controllable things for when you can hunt, when the moon's right, when the wind's right, when the weather's right. Those are things that you can look at and strategize and plan and then execute, and that's all going to help you. Yeah. No question about it. So
and I think the biggest difference between me and most guys, like I was saying earlier, is for me, number one is the wind. You want to talk about a light bulb moment. When I quit hunting winds that were good for me and started hunting winds that were good for the animal I was after, that changed my success tenfold. I mean, if you think about it, what's going to make a big buck, 5, 6, 7-year-old deer feel comfortable enough to move during daylight more than a wind that is in his favor? So why not give him the wind? Let that animal use the wind to his advantage and then use that against him. You've got to find a spot somewhere along that buck's travel pattern where you can get within bow range of him while he's using the wind to his advantage, because you can't kill him if he's not moving during daylight. What's going to make him move during daylight? A good wind. They live and die by their nose. So give a big deer the wind to his advantage. So that's number one for me. And number two is the moon, because I've killed too many big deer on the red moon that shouldn't have been moving because the weather sucked.
Yep.
It was either high winds, high heat. The weather's important. I'll hunt a cold front or high barometric, pressure day every chance I get. But I'm going to pay more attention to that moon. And then that weather is kind of like icing on the cake. Yep. You get a good wind, good moon, and then you got, a storm coming in or a high pressure day. That's the perfect storm for killing a big deer. And you got to be able to stay out of those kill spots until you get 2 or 3 of those factors lining up, because every time you go in there into your kill spot and you don't get it done, the game gets tougher and tougher and tougher, because that deer, he's going to pick up on something, whether he hears you or sees you coming out of there after dark or you leave some scent behind. I mean, it just gets tougher each time. So if you've got the discipline, you've done all the scouting, you've found this deer and whatever you had to do to secure permission, you put your food plots in, you scout, you got all this time and money invested. Why wouldn't you wait until everything's lined up and the deck is stacked in your favor before you go in there and try to kill them?
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't make any sense to me. So, and a lot of guys a lot of guys say, hey, it's hunting season, I'm going to be hunting. Well, if those things aren't lined up, I'm still hunting. I'm not going to be in my kill spot. I might be on a different farm. I might be in an observation stand. I'm going to be out there somewhere.
Yep.
I'm not sitting at home on the couch, watching TV.
Watching Alabama beat Ohio State. Yeah, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
But all right, so a disclaimer, I guess, here is that, so many guys are, well, I guess that's not really the way to put it, but the MoonGuide was something that you and I and Andre, as well as a host of other people, used long before we bought the MoonGuide. As a disclaimer, if guys go back and look at the old whitetail addiction stuff from way back in the day, long before you and I bought the MoonGuide was being touted and used. And I swear there's old footage of you back when you didn't have near as much gray as you do right now in your beard. And mine was, I don't even think I had a beard back then. Footage using the MoonGuide and talking about it. And then the opportunity came for us to buy it, and we knew it was a great product. So that's just a disclaimer to throw out there, is that this wasn't something that we magically created it or came up with out of thin air and are touting it now. There was lots of trial and error, and we both went through this as hocus pocus long ago, and with trial and error proved that it was a heck of a product to the point that we bought it.
Yeah, I was fortunate to know Jeff before he passed and spent a lot of time on the phone talking with him about hunting and the moon's effect on deer. And, I don't know if you even know this or not. I don't know if we talked about it. I mean, I can't remember what I had for breakfast 4 hours ago, but the first 200-inch deer that I killed, I talked to Jeff about killing that deer, and he kept telling me, you got to make sure you get it done the first time you go in. You need to wait for this red moon. And I finally got the right wind and the right moon and dove in and killed, my first 200. And I was pretty much sold after that. But yeah, it's been something that I've paid attention to for a long time. And, we bought it because it was something that honestly I believed in, and used and saw it work. And it's worked consistently for over 20 years.
Yep.
And it's, like I said before, it's not the end all beat all, but I mean, if you're not paying attention to the moon, you're missing the boat.
Yep.
I've been hunting for 40 years. I still learn new stuff every year.
Right.
And that's just something that I'd hate to go through a season without knowing, when those days are, because I've had some special days and special memories on that red moon for sure.
Without a doubt. All right. Piggybacking. I've used that word now 3 times. If I do it again, Kevin, punch me. Equipment. Let's talk about your bow setup, your bow, your arrow, broadhead, your heavy arrow guy, medium weight arrow guy. Go through your bow setup with us. What are you shooting A to Z?
Well, I've been shooting the Hoyt for 7 years now. The new RX-7, I think, is the best one yet. I've still got my carbon Spider from the very first year, and I love that bow. That was my favorite bow to date until this year. I think the RX-7 is the best shooting bow they've had. It's not the quietest bow, but I love that compact carbon design. You and I have spent a lot of time hunting really late season. I don't think the weather affects that carbon like it does aluminum bow, but I love the RX-7 and Black Eagle. I have 2 setups. For whitetail, I shoot the X Impact, which is, I believe it's almost like their highest end hunting, more of a target arrow, but it's a micro diameter. It's the straightest arrows that they have. And my whitetail setup is 450 grain. And then for elk and big game, I use a Deep Impact, and that's a 650 grain arrow. The Radical archery design, the Tycon. I just like a big fixed blade broadhead. So that's what I'm shooting with as far as broadheads go. And then I got 100 grain for the whitetail rig and 125 for the, for the elk setup. And obviously got to have a Luminoc.
Yep.
Been shooting Luminocs for 20 some years. So that's pretty much my setup. And I love it. I wouldn't change a thing.
Single pin, multiple pin, slider sight.
I tried to switch to a single pin, but when you're hunting and filming, anytime you can eliminate a step to that process, you've got to. So I'm not going to add a step, and having to adjust that sight dial just is a step I can't afford to add to the process. So multiple pins for me.
Yeah.
I did get one of the Garmin sights this year. I haven't tried it yet. You and I talked about your review on it, and you got me thinking, there's 2 or 3 things that I might not want to test, because when it comes to something going wrong in the woods, man, it's going to happen to me, and it's going to happen to the worst possible time. So,
yeah, just be real thorough when you put that on your bow. And we obviously aren't going to get into that, but what about training? Do you do, you sight your bow in, shoot it on the weekends? I mean, what do you do there?
If there's anything I probably do that's different than most guys is, I shoot year round, but in June, because I normally go on a bear hunt in the spring, is when I'll start shooting broadheads, and I shoot them all through the summer instead of shooting field tips, because I just want to make sure, I'm not going to be hunting with field tips. So, why shoot them? I'll have multiple targets set up so I don't have to worry about tearing up my equipment. But yeah, I shoot broadheads all summer long because I want to make sure there's anything wrong with my setup. I'm going to know about it months instead of days in advance of hunting season. So
we preach that all the time, is shooting like you're hunting. We try. I mean, we have training days where we'll actually go down and to the farm and throw stands up and put 3D targets out and cut shooting lanes. And we've got an elevated platform. We're lucky to have that at the office. So yeah, hunt or train like what you're going to be hunting in.
Yeah.
Adam, is there like a drop away rest or anything that you like? And do you run any kind of like sidebars or anything for stabilizers?
I've been using the integrated ultra rest that Hoyt sells, with their bows, to go on the is it Picatinny rail?
Picatinny, yep.
Picatinny rail. So I've had no issues with that ultra rest, with it failing or locking up or anything, knock on wood. And yeah, the last couple of years with the sidebars, the guy that I have do all my work on my bow, he's got a deal that he sets that bow in, and it actually, he's able to add weight, to the front or to the side to get that bow absolutely perfect and stable in your hand. I mean, I can, extend my arm out fully, and that bow is just rock solid. It's not going anywhere. So
that's awesome.
That's, I've taken advantage of the sidebars and really got my bow perfectly balanced, I guess is the best description for that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So some rapid fire questions for you to wrap things up. I know we're closing in on over an hour, and we need to come back and do part 2, because this has been awesome. And if you could hunt any state other than your home state, what would it be?
Canada.
That's quite a state. That's
Alberta.
Alberta.
Yeah.
Alberta. Yep. Okay. That's good. What is the future looking like for you and your goals for this upcoming season?
Well, my goal every year as far as deer season goes is try to get on a 200-inch deer. So that's kind of the focus for this fall. Already got one goal for this year out of the way. Got my nephew his first bear with a bow
That was
last
awesome.
2 weeks ago up in Saskatchewan. So I guess, short term, long term is always a big whitetail, man. I'd love to crack 200 inches on a typical or beat my personal best, 219 for a non-typical, but you could offer me any hunt in the world, and I think my first choice is always going to be, going after a giant deer. So
yeah. All right, tell us how guys can find MoonGuide, and what you've got coming up, if anything new with the MoonGuide and anything with Team 200 and the show, what you got going on there other than the new ICO gear sponsorship. Plug,
right.
Engage.
we made the switch, and I will wave the flag because, I was all in with Sitka. They make some of the best gear out there, and I was fully vested. And when you sent me that stuff late season last year, I'd only seen it online, and to be able to compete with their clothing, I feel like I took no step backward with the quietness of your gear and the warmth of it. And as far as I'm concerned, your pattern is twice the pattern that Sitka is. I mean, just absolutely disappears.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Love it. Not I don't feel like I gave anything up other than having 10 grand worth of Sitka I had to sell.
We need to have
on Facebook.
We need to have a buyback program where if you switch to Osseo, we buy back Sitka or something like that.
Yeah.
That's what you
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. That we're gonna have to edit that out.
No, really happy with that. And
with it?
appreciate the opportunity to be involved with that. So yeah.
No, that's
really
awesome.
happy,
What about
that.
anything new coming with the MoonGuide?
Yeah, actually, our latest upgrade is being tested by Google Play and the App Store as we speak. We added mapping features to the MoonGuide this year, so you can actually, go into the parcel data and you can save your property. It'll outline the property where your farm, so you got your boundaries saved on the map. You can add waypoints if you want to mark your trail cameras, your tree stands. When you're scouting, you can, add a trail to it. You can measure your food plots. You can measure distances. The MoonGuide is not going to be a competitor with your Hunt Stand and Onyx as far as the mapping goes. We're never going to have, the mapping features that they have, but to have all the basics that you need for mapping goes, it's all right there on the MoonGuide app now.
That's awesome.
So that's all being tested, and as soon as it's approved, it's going to be released. So I'm sure here in the next 2 weeks that'll be released, and that's the biggest thing. I mean, I've used the MoonGuide for hunting. I mean, it's a hunting app, knowing the best days and times, and now we've got the mapping. So I don't have to switch back and forth between multiple apps. I mean, we got the hunting information, the weather, and now we got the mapping. So it's a one-stop shop.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's awesome. What about and guys, find that app store or whatever, moonguide.com.
Yeah, you can go to moonguide.com. We've got links in the store for Google Play and the App Store. If you want to go directly to the app stores, just look up Deer Hunters MoonGuide. We're on Instagram and Facebook as well. So,
and how about Team 200? Anything new coming on there? I know you've expanded your team. You got a heck of a big buck killing crew.
Yeah, we just added a guy from Alberta, outfitter from Alberta. So we've got, I think, 13 guys on the show now. And the season just kicked off this week we've actually got a traditional team now. The 3 guys from PA that have been shooting longbows for 30 years. So the first show of the season was the traditional guys, and it's on Pursuit Channel, Waypoint TV, which is growing. I mean, you can get Waypoint TV just about anywhere now. All the smart TVs, you can download their app. It's all free. I mean, waypoint is just kicking butt. So
that's awesome. Well, man, we're gonna we got into about half of our questions and points, so we're gonna have to do part 2 of this. If you've got time, in a week or two, hop back on and go again. Kevin, you got anything before we sign off here?
Yeah, I wanted to. I got a bunch, but we'll have to hit on some more tactics later on when we get you back on. But you mentioned you shooting your biggest deer and how that hunt played out, and it was awesome. I kind of want to know, and I think I know the gist of the story. What was one that got away? How'd that play out? And what would you do differently, I guess, if you could have that back?
Man, the biggest one that ever got away was that buck I hit up in the bow zone 20 years ago. And
have you seen that deer?
I've seen clips of it. I think it was on the MoonGuide commercial.
Double drop time.
Yeah, it was a giant.
Yeah, they had the sheds from the year before were 225. So he was, mid 230s the year I hit him. And I mean, that came down to just a mental error. I mean, that deer had been, in bow range for 3 hours laying down with a doe. And I was on the end of a lake, and they were basically following a trail around the edge of a lake. And the doe was laying in the middle trail at 30 yards. And for 3 hours, I'm thinking he's going to get up and follow that doe. And I'm going to put my 20-yard pin right on the top of his lungs and let him have it. And it'll be the haze buck.
Yeah.
And when that deer finally got up, he angled towards me to run another buck off, and he closed the gap to 20 yards. And it just never registered, that he actually came closer. And I just sitting there in that stand for 3 hours thinking what I was going to do. And I hit right where I was aiming, but I shot him for 30 instead of 20 and hit him in no man's land and never saw him again. So it was just, it's one of those things.
So was that a buck that you knew he was already in that area and you did like a hanging hunt, or did you go and
No, that was on an outfitted hunt. And that outfitter put me in there, and he knew of the deer. He didn't obviously know the deer was in there, because I don't think he would have had me in there.
He'd have been in there.
He'd have been in there, or he'd had one of his millionaire clients in there. But they basically stuck me in there, believe it or not, because they were hauling manure onto that farm, semi after semi after semi. And when we got there, it reeked to high heaven. I mean, you never smelled so much manure in your life. And he's like, I'm not sure you're going to want to sit here. I'm like, hell yes, I am, because there ain't no deer that's going to ever smell me. And all my stuff reeked when I got into camp. But I mean, it was a perfect scenario.
Oh,
well, I got a bunch of tactic questions and stuff for you, Adam, because I really want to pick your brain, but I think we're running low on time. We really need to get you back on soon, because I got a bunch for you.
Yeah, anytime, man.
We appreciate it. Anything else you need to put in here, or we'll pick it up?
Just one thing.
Oh, here we go.
OH.
I love it.
There we go.
I love it. Good stuff, man. Well, we appreciate it, brother, and we will pick this up again soon.
Sounds good, man. Thanks
All right,
again.
man.
Thanks.
Have a good one. Appreciate it.
All right.
All right, bye.